Recording in progress.
Good morning. Today I will be preaching on the gospel reading. In 2008, I accompanied a friend of mine to Ethiopia to adopt her son. And her son was living in an orphanage many miles south of the capital, Addis Ababa. And so when we landed, we took a van and wound our way for many hours south. And to my surprise, I saw the landscape change from dusty desert to verdant rainforest. And that's what it looks like down there. And so when we came upon the orphanage, there was a large compound with also, surrounded by trees. It's just beautiful and green. And there was a medical clinic. There was a surgical theater. There was sleeping quarters for the children, a cafeteria, a nursery for the babies, a playground. And so I watched the children play, and I saw that some of the children were fairly older, like reaching puberty. And I thought, okay. And we were invited to have lunch with the children. We went into the cafeteria, and the children filed in and sat down, and we sat down with them. And this thing happened that has seared in my mind, and I think about it a lot. The children are all sitting, we're all kind of quiet, and then when they brought the food in, the children began to wail and weep. Their eyes were gushing tears, so almost all the faces were drowned in tears. And I was so confused. And I didn't know what was going on outside of my own heart breaking, watching these children weep and wail at the sight of food. And our guide said, this happens at every meal. So later on, we met with the doctor of the orphanage, and he congratulated my friend for adopting a 3-year-old boy. He said, you know, this boy is very lucky, because most of the people who want to adopt from us, they only want babies. So it's really important that people adopt older children, like 3-year-olds. And like, well, what about the other children that I saw, the ones who are 10, 12? What will happen to them? And he said, they'll probably live here till they become old enough to work. It is very unlikely that they will be adopted. And he then looked at me and he says, do you know what the worst fate will be for these children who won't be adopted? And having seen this sight at the cafeteria with the children weeping and wailing at the sight of food, I hazarded a guess. Starvation? He said, oh no. The worst fate that can happen to the children who don't get adopted is they will not know how to make an attachment to another human being. Love will be most difficult. To receive love and to give love, because they have not had someone to attach to. Even though this happened many years ago, I think about this a lot. I think about the children. I think about what that doctor said. And it makes me contemplate in a world that is so full of need, overwhelming need. You just have to look at the newspaper and hear the news. You know the overwhelming need in this whole world of people in great physical need. So I wonder, in a world of so much overwhelming physical need, is it brazen of me to still argue for the deep human need of love, of spiritual sustenance? Have we Christians preferenced physical sustenance over spiritual sustenance? What would Episcopal evangelism look like if we were to treat human need for love as much as human need for food? What would our ministry look like? So to ponder this, I take us to the story of the feeding of the more than 5,000. On the surface, the story looks like a miracle story, or maybe even a call to action story, a moral story. Feed others, give the hungry something to eat. And of course that is true. Yes, it is Christian ministry to feed the hungry, to give food to those who need it. That is very basic. But something else is going on here. Let's consider the context. John the Baptist, the prophet, has been murdered, executed by Herod Antipas. And the disciples of John the Baptist has told Jesus what happened. But this news didn't just reach Jesus. It reached many people. Did you know Herod Antipas cut off Baptist's head? And it's just spreading like wildfire through the crowd. And this is a crowd who very likely had been following John at the river and now has moved up to Galilee with Jesus. And they hear this news. And they are scared. The powers that be continue to murder those who would speak. Life is so dangerous in the empire for those who would speak out. What ought they to do? How will they have hope? This is the need of the crowd. And the crowd is also probably traumatized by this news of having lost John. I imagine some of them were baptized by John. And now they're looking to Jesus, who was also baptized by John, and wonder, will Jesus lead us now? What will happen? How will they find hope in this world where despots rule and wield their power? And Jesus heard this news. And he thought, probably to himself, I need a little time away. I need some quiet. He has just heard his cousin has been killed. He needs some time to mourn. He needs some time to think about, okay, what now? What now? And he thought he needed some time alone. Oh, the best laid plans, right? He goes into the desert. And lo and behold, the crowd heard that he was going to the desert, and they actually got there ahead of him. And Jesus saw the crowd, and he saw their need. And in the Greek, he hit him in the gut. That's what the word compassion is being translated. The gut is feeling all this compassion for a crowd that is yearning for a reality that is different than the reality of Herod. And so he goes and he heals them. There was very likely physical healing. And yet, knowing how much healing happens that is not an outside wound, I bet Jesus spent a lot of time listening to the people talk about, I don't know how to go on. How do we have hope? And in the listening, he was beginning to heal them. And as the sun was setting, the very practical disciples wonder, how are these people going to eat? And they go to Jesus and they say, send them away, because it's almost sundown. They need to go and get something to eat. And so it is at this point that we really have this conversation about physical need and spiritual need. And the reality is they all have understood what physical hunger feels like. But who has given them the name of this spiritual hunger? Who has addressed this? And so Jesus takes this moment to enact a sign. A sign. You have heard me preach often enough that you probably think, oh, she's talking about signs in the Gospel of John, right? But all the miracles in the Gospels are signs. And what is a sign? What is a miracle? What's the difference? A very quick lesson in semiotics. So, you know how when you are driving here, you'll see signs, like, and sometimes you'll see a sign, for example, let's say it's this kind of sign, it's got a curvy thing with an arrow. You know its meaning, right? The sign is indicating up ahead there'll be a curvy road, and then you got to think, what do I do, right? I should slow down, or I should go faster. So the sign does not say, look at me, I'm so pretty, right? It says, no, let me help you. Let me show you something. Up ahead is something possibly dangerous, so get ready, right? So the difference between calling something a miracle and calling something a sign is the direction of our perspective. A miracle, whenever we call things a miracle, what is the first question you ask? How can it happen, right? How can it happen? Does it, like what? Like, did it magically, multiply? What's. So a miracle is the opposite of a sign in that it points back at itself. So your dialogue is about how can it happen? But when it's a sign, it means, what is the meaning? How am I supposed to point my perspective in this direction that the sign is indicating? So this sign is very important because it looks back to the Exodus and looks forward to the crucifixion and the Last Supper. So let's talk about the symbols in the sign, right? when you look at a sign, a traffic sign, you see the symbols, right? The curve, right? That's a symbol, right? And the arrow, you know which direction. So we have symbols in this sign as well. So one symbol is the 5 loaves for the 5 books of the Torah. The bread. Thinking back to Exodus now. The bread is like the manna. The fish. The fish. No, wait. Wasn't it quails? Right? And so, yes, it's quails if you read Exodus. But if you read Numbers, the word is very much like flying fish. And the Jewish commentators have often wondered, when God blew in the quails from the sea, wait, I'm a good ornithologist. Quails don't live in the sea. Must be fish, right? Flying fish. So you've got now, so it's in the culture. People sometimes think it's fish, sometimes think it's quails, but now here the symbols are brought together. You've got the Torah, you've got the Exodus theme, you've got bread and manna, you've got fish, and now the sign is all there for the moment. And when you look at a sign, what happens before you even know it is the eruption of meaning. So you don't look at a sign and go, oh, that sign, is like, you already know by looking at it, it's signifying. It's signifying a meaning. So here, suddenly, there's an explosion of meaning as these symbols arrive toward this sign, and it's this multiplication. And the sign reaches its fullness as Jesus multiplies, hands it to the apostles, and the apostles move into the crowd and looking into each face, handing, giving, and they eat in a very calm way. They eat, and in the Greek, it says they are satisfied. They are satisfied. They are calm. They're at peace from this superabundance. Now compare that with the Exodus feeding, right? They've been wandering in the desert. They're starving. They're so hungry. And this food, the quails come in, and you remember the story. They are crazy hungry. They grab the quails, and they do not prepare them. They just start eating. And they are eating so much. Exodus tells us they eat till they die. They eat till they die. People died because they were starving so much. They couldn't control the anxiety that food brought on. So much like those children. They couldn't. The food signified not sustenance, but the lack of it. And Jesus comes and shows the sign of the abundant love of God. What that looks like compared to the starvation, that need for food. And what happens here is that there is peace. There is satisfaction. And there is leftover. It will never run out. This love of God will never run out. They can continually feed. They can continually feed. And 12 baskets. 12, the symbol. What can 12 signify? Let me know. 12. Huh? 12 tribes. Ding, ding, ding. Joe's been reading his Bible. 12 tribes. So, this is an interesting thing in the Gospel of Matthew. There's a feeding of the over 5,000, and then 2 chapters later, there's a feeding of the over 4,000. Did Matthew forget that he just told the story of the multiplication of loaves and fish? No. In the feeding of the over 5,000, 12 baskets are collected. And in the feeding of the over 4,000, 7 baskets are collected, an overabundance. First for the Jew, then for the Gentile. This sign erupts upon Israel, this abundance. And then it keeps moving and flowing to all the nations. In the book of Joshua, 7 Gentile nations represent the whole world. And so what we have in this sign is that it cannot be contained. This overabundance of God's love pours from Israel to the Gentiles. To this. This is the continuation of the sign. Here at the table, the love of God continues to pour out for you. Ho, Isaiah says, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, you don't need it. Come and eat. Come, receive. It's all for you. And so, when we feed here, we are given sustenance in a world where the Herods continue to reign their terror. But we know the God of love and how to be sustained. This is for you. Amen.